to the entertaining Talkin' Sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. And in this video, I'm going to talk about two topics. One, about a list that came out from ESPN. Now, ESPN did not conduct it. That's what made it interesting to me. They did a poll from 50 people from within the NFL on who the best running back in the sport is. And our guy Saquon Barkley got the number one spot. I'll speak on that. I'll also play an audio clip of them discussing it. In addition to that, I wanted to touch on another topic in the NFL right now, and it's more of a broad NFL topic, obviously dealing with this pandemic. And the NFL, according to Tom Pelissero, will come out and give the players an option to opt out of playing this year, dependent on their circumstances, whether or not they fear that they, may have a medical history, whether or not somebody in their family may have a medical history, so on and so forth, or probably whether or not they just don't want to play. Now, there will be a deadline when the players need to decide whether or not they're going to opt out this year before the season starts, but there will be something coming out for the players regarding that. I'll pull up the quotes for that as well, and it only makes sense. I mean, obviously, in a climate like this, I think everybody should be able to sympathize with the players, and if they don't want to play, I think you kind of got to understand that. A lot of these guys are financially stable, and yeah, even though they love playing the sport, health definitely comes first. So I can completely understand why the NFL would give the players the option not to play this year. So we'll have to wait and see how that affects the sport and how many players elect not to play. We've heard a number of players come out and say that they have questions about whether or not they should be playing this year. You've heard the same thing with baseball, basketball, so on and so forth. So that'll be interesting to see as that story develops, as training camp is getting closer and closer. As far as Barkley goes, I mean, I've been on record as saying that you call me biased, I'm a Giants fan, but it's nice to hear it from people from within the NFL, unbiased people, but I completely agree with it. I think Saquon Barkley is the best well-rounded running back. I know that if you go by statistics, it's clearly Christian McCaffrey, but in terms of talent, when you factor in what he's had to deal with, injuries and his poor offensive line, I think Barkley is the most talented running back in the sport, and I've said time and time again, I expect him to break onto the scene this year in a big way. But let's jump into the quotes regarding the players first, and then we'll get into the audio clip regarding the top 10 running backs in the NFL. Here's the first quote. According to a report Wednesday from Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network, the league and the NFL Players Association are working on a player opt-out provision for those athletes who are considering sitting out the 2020 season due to concerns over the COVID-19. Pelissero reported this on NFL Now, giving the following information. My understanding is both the union and the league intend to have an opt-out for players who have either a pre-existing condition, family members with pre-existing conditions, just general concerns over COVID-19, would not want to play this season. General managers were told on a call earlier this week there would be a specific date by which players would need to opt out. That date is still to be determined. So there's some news on that as we wait for the start of the season to see if we're going to have a season. And the players that I think like that would affect the most would be players that are already financially stable, outside of people, like he said, that have pre-existing conditions and things like that. But maybe players that already have made more than enough money to live for the rest of their lives. The rookies, I don't think that will affect. The players that are kind of playing on veteran minimums, that probably won't affect. But for players that need the money, that don't need the money rather, and may not be playing anymore for the love of the sport, I could completely see some of them sitting out, but it'll be interesting to see. There's going to be more than enough replacement players to step in, though, at least in my opinion, even, when you take into account the players that may be sitting out due to the coronavirus. But, of course, that could affect teams around the NFL, including the New York Giants. The next thing I wanted to pull up was the audio clip regarding Saquon Barkley. I'm also going to pull up the top 10 list before we play it. This was voted on, like I said, by 50 individuals from within the NFL, coaches, scouts, general managers, whatever it may be. These were the top 10. Barkley came in at 1, McCaffrey 2, Elliott 3, Kamara 4, Henry 5, Cook 6, Chubb 7, Mixon 8, Josh Jacobs 9, and Le'Veon Bell 10. And I think that's a pretty fair list. I personally would probably have Henry at 3. I might bump Zeke down to 4 or 5. But I think the top 5 in no specific order is correct. And the top 2 is clearly the top 2 to me, and that is Barkley and McCaffrey. The ironic thing about that is both of those running backs were drafted by our GM now, Dave Gettleman. Of course, both were top 10 picks. Barkley number 2 overall. So you expect these running backs to be near the top of the list. Bell at number 10 is interesting, being that he's coming off such a poor year. But I do think Bell will have a bounce back season with the Jets' improved offensive line. Chubb could very easily break into the top 3 or 4 by year's end. The same could be said for Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook had a great year last year. Matter of fact, you could probably argue Cook over Kamara. But that's just my opinion in terms of the top 10. But, I think it's a pretty fair list. Kind of wanted to pull up the audio clip for you guys of what the people on ESPN had to say.
Jeremy, you compiled this list. This is not an ESPN list. This is you interviewing 50 people from inside the National Football League. What would you say was the biggest point of contention on the list amongst the running backs?
Well, Greeny was the top 3, and Saquon being number 1, which was a surprise to me. I thought it would be McCaffrey, but it turns out teams just scared. They're more fearful of this guy more than anybody else. He's got the speed, the power, the contact balance. This is a guy that opposing offensive coaches would stop studying their Microsoft tablet just to go watch this guy on the other side. Veteran linebackers told me you have to put 4 players on him at one time because he can break 80 yards at any moment. And so he got the edge over McCaffrey because for as great as he is, they say McCaffrey isn't as maybe sturdy or powerful, where Saquon has a little bit of everything. And then Ezekiel Elliott got a lot of first place votes, but not quite enough because only 4 rushes of 20-plus yards last year on 301 attempts. So several coaches I talked to wondered if he's lost a little bit of explosion coming off that long holdout in Cabo last year.
Okay, that's interesting. A lot to unpack there. Nikovich, let me come to you because you're a linebacker. Which of these guys scares you the most? Of all the running backs in the NFL right now, which guy causes you to lose the most sleep during the week leading up to the game?
Well, I can tell you as a linebacker that a strong running back can break the will of a defense very easily. So I agree with number 1. I disagree with number 3. I think that Derrick Henry should be up in the number 3 spot because of that. He's big, physical, powerful, and not only can he break it, he can outrun everybody on the football field. So he's a big physical running back that is faster than everyone on the football field. So I feel that the number 3 spot should be Derrick Henry, and we should bump down Zeke to possibly number 5 because of the fact that when he has those breakaway runs, that he's getting caught. And also, when you think about it, if you put Derrick Henry in the Cowboys uniform with that offensive line and the way that they run the ball with that offensive line, I think that he'd have a lot of success there as well. Now,
Ezekiel Elliott came into the sport as a huge star coming out of Ohio State, obviously goes to the super high spotlight of the Dallas Cowboys, and you're right. They're a run-first team that featured that behind a really good offensive line. Dominique, does Zeke look to you like he has lost a step?
And
it's hard to say that he's lost a step.
And there you have it. Just wanted to kind of pull up the where they were talking about Saquon Barkley. They then went on to talk about Ezekiel Elliott and whether or not he lost a step. One stat that I found interesting when they were talking about Zeke was that he only had 4 runs last year of 20 yards or more in over, I think it was 301 carries. So that was a little surprising to me. But Zeke, the strength, I think it all comes down to how do you value your running back? Do you value a running back like Zeke, who's able to push forward and get that extra 2 yards, and also is a great blocker? In those aspects, he's stronger than Saquon Barkley. But in terms of a home run threat and in terms of an all-around back, his pass-catching ability, his ability to pose a mismatch, I think it is Saquon Barkley. Now, Christian McCaffrey, of course, is incredibly versatile. He's coming off a 1,000 season. The things that I question with Christian McCaffrey, one, his longevity. He's not built like Saquon Barkley. He's at least 20 pounds lighter. He's not as big, even though he is elusive. I think Saquon Barkley is a better athlete, and he's bigger. I think he will have a longer shelf life at a position that traditionally does not have the longest shelf life in the NFL. As far as a guy like Zeke, yeah, like I said, he is definitely good in those short yardage situations. The same can be said for a guy like Derrick Henry as opposed to Saquon Barkley, but I don't think they have that overall game that a guy like Barkley has. Barkley will definitely need to work on the pass blocking, though. That is certainly something that he struggled with mightily last year. Some may point to the fact that he had the ankle injury, and that definitely was part of the reason why he wasn't as good of a blocker. In his rookie season, I thought he was a pretty good blocker, not on the level of a guy like Zeke Elliott, but I thought he was at least league average, if not a little better. Hopefully he rebounds and gets better in that aspect with the new running back coach that the New York Giants brought in with Burton Burns, but we'll have to wait and see, how if that aspect of his game does improve this year. I think the Giants are going to use him a little bit more in the passing game this year. I was kind of underwhelmed with the way he was used last year. He had 92 catches in his rookie season. So I expect to see the New York Giants find ways to get Barkley involved. And like I've said in previous streams and in previous videos regarding Saquon Barkley, I expect him to compete and maybe even break Tiki Barber's scrimmage yards record by the New York Giants of 2390. I don't know if he'll quite get that, but I think he's going to lead the league in scrimmage yards this year, and I think he's going to have a monster season, knowing that he's coming up on a potential contract extension after his third year. And for people that don't want that, well, expect it. One thing you'll notice, a lot of the running backs at the top of that list, they got extended after 3 years, and they are in the long-term plans of their football teams. Guys like Zeke Elliott, guys like Christian McCaffrey, guys like Derrick Henry. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. I think Saquon Barkley will have a monster year, and I completely agree. I think when it comes to talent, I think he is the best running back in the sport. I think he was not presented with the best offensive line coming into the league. They've ranked near the bottom of the league the first 2 years in the league, and he still led the league in scrimmage yards in his rookie season. And he was number one in both 20 and 40-yard carries in his rookie year. Last year, he had a bit of an injury, and he was not the same back for at least half the season. But hopefully he bounces back, and hopefully he's back to his rookie form. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.